The issue of immigration and immigration reform hit very close to Atlanta on Thursday afternoon when the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, also known as MARTA, announced that CEO Greenwood would be resigning, stepping down early, taking an early retirement because of issues and concerns over his work permit and his immigration status. This is Political Update for Friday, July 18th, 2025. I'm Tim Darnell, happy as always to be joined by one of the true faces of Atlanta News First and one of the most recognized broadcast journalists in Atlanta, Rick Folbaum. Rick, we don't want to minimize the issue of immigration in terms of all of the hundreds of thousands of people who have been taking place nationwide in terms of demonstrations protesting President Donald Trump's efforts to enforce a stricter immigration law across the country in terms of immigration and customs enforcement agencies or detaining and deporting people who are here illegally. But this particular case, when it involves someone so high profile and someone who is so far of the Atlanta strata in terms of political and business and social strata, this issue feels a little bit different.
Well, it does. Greenwood, we should say, first of all, is here in the country illegally. He is awaiting documentation that would allow him to stay here indefinitely, but it does not, at least at this point, appear that he is breaking any kind of law. So that we should get out of the way. He is Canadian. He began his career in the transit industry, working as a bus driver in Canada, and then worked his way up through the ranks of MARTA after coming here several years ago. Went on to serve as CEO after the death of its former CEO. But I think that the fact that this has been named as one of the reasons for his early retirement, family concerns, and another thing that was mentioned as far as why he has decided to take this step. It really does. You're right. It thrusts this issue of immigration and the pursuit of finding people who are here in the country not legally and forcing them out or having them leave on their own. It really does sort of thrust it to the forefront again, as we're talking about somebody in a very high level position. I should also say that a lot of times what is named, what is officially named as a reason for someone leaving a position is not always the whole story, and sometimes it's not even the actual story. And so we don't know. I don't want to speculate on what's going on with Mr. Greenwood and his family, but we'll take him at his word that he's making this decision for personal reasons. And we should note that the board has accepted his resignation, without really any kind of pushback. And they've also agreed, as part of his severance package, to pay him out for the remainder of his contract. And this is an executive who was making a very large salary in the $400,000 plus a year range, and he will now be paid that money in full for the remainder of his contract, which goes on for another year plus. So, we'll see what happens. There are certainly a lot of people in the city council who will not be disappointed to see Greenwood leave that post. MARTA has suffered some major problems, especially since COVID-19, and it has lagged compared to other mass transit agencies in other parts of the country in terms of getting those ridership levels back up to the pre-COVID levels.
Everyone has a public transit complaint or horror story, and we hear them all the time, and MARTA has come under a lot of criticism, rightfully so. This is a publicly funded agency through the Georgia General Assembly and also through the city of Atlanta and the DeKalb County. So taxpayers like you and I contribute annually to MARTA through its public funding. Yet this is an agency that despite the fact that many people feel that the rail line doesn't extend to wherever they really want to go, like Washington or New York City, and sometimes trains lag behind. This is nonetheless an agency that moves hundreds of thousands of people daily all across the city of Atlanta and the metro area, not only by rail but by bus.
That's right. And, you think about Atlanta, it is not exactly a city that is associated with its mass transit systems the way, for example, New York City is, or London, two cities that I've had the opportunity to live in. And even in those cities where the transit systems are used by such a large percentage of the population, there are complaints about the subway systems as well. So, I think no matter where you go, there are going to be people who have complaints about, this or that. But like I said, I think that there will be people in City Hall and also in the City Council building that will not be disappointed to see Greenwood go, and hope that whoever it is that comes in on a permanent basis to take his place is able to steer the agency in a more profitable direction.
And let's talk for a moment, as we're continuing to talk about the resignation of MARTA CEO Collie Greenwood over issues regarding his immigration status and also his personal situation, wanting to spend more time with family and friends. Let's talk about where MARTA goes from here. We're all familiar with the incident over the weekend at a Beyonce concert where an escalator malfunctioned at the Bondi City station, causing several people to be hospitalized with injuries. We talk about the somewhat irregular train schedule that the system finds itself under whenever there are major events. And yet we have one of the largest sporting events in the world coming to Atlanta next year. Where does MARTA go from here, and what are some of the challenges the agency faces?
Well, I think you mentioned some of the upcoming events taking place here in Atlanta, and really the need for a reliable and safe public transit system for when all of these people come to Atlanta next year for the World Cup matches that will take place here. We've talked about so many different parts of the city preparing, gearing up for the influx of visitors that are expected, and the transit system it has got to be up there near the top in terms of different agencies and offerings that the city of Atlanta really wants and needs to make available to all of its visitors in order to really, I think, be thought of and looked at as a world-class city. The issue here, of course, is that we do not really have a culture here of riding mass transit. There isn't the long history in Atlanta with mass transit the way that there is in other parts of the country, like the ones that I meant, like New York, for example, and London, which I mentioned. But I think that people here, there is a mindset that goes along with public transit, and Atlantans and folks don't seem to have that mindset the way that that people in other parts of the country do. But to get it up and running and have it be reliable and safe is going to be crucial, especially with those big ticket events that are coming here to town in the next year plus.
Well, the issue of immigration is one of the main topics, one of the main issues that President Donald Trump's administration continues to confront. The other issue, seemingly never ending, the very strange case of Jeffrey Epstein and the release of any public documents, public transcripts related to that infamous case. We all remember then presidential candidate Donald Trump on the campaign trail said that he would like to see as much transcripts and information regarding the case and the subsequent ruled suicide of Jeffrey Epstein after he was tried and convicted of some very heinous, disgraceful charges. Donald Trump said he would like to see those records released. Very recently, over the last couple of weeks, his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has said, though, any records would not be released, that there is nothing to release and there's no evidence that contradicts the official report that Jeffrey Epstein did in fact commit or died by his own hand inside a New York State correctional facility. Within the last 24 hours, some pretty remarkable developments. Two of President Trump's strongest supporters in the U.S. House, Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert and Georgia's own Marjorie Taylor Greene, have co-sponsored a resolution that was introduced by Oklahoma Republican Congressman Thomas Massie and, believe it or not, California Democrat Ro Khanna. Whoever said bipartisanship was dead in the U.S. House of Representatives really needs to take a look at this, but this resolution is calling on President Trump's administration to release portions of the Jeffrey Epstein case. And this morning, overnight, I should say, President Trump posted on Truth Social that he is instructing the Attorney General to release portions of the grand jury proceedings in the Epstein case. This is an incident that still has far-reaching political consequences.
It certainly could, and politics, the saying goes, makes strange bedfellows. And so you see here MAGA, the president's most ardent MAGA supporters, in agreement with some of the nation's top Democrats in their view that all of this information must be released. Donald Trump came into office and really, in a lot of ways, built his political career by promising to drain the swamp. And so for a lot of his supporters who latched onto that and really were attracted to the idea of that, to now see his own Justice Department saying essentially there's nothing to see here after years of promising and sort of conspiracy theories being stoked that there was, said that there were other things at play, I think is very disappointing for the president's base. Whether this is the kind of thing that will drag on, say, like the Whitewater scandal for the Clinton administration years ago, a story that that broke in the news and then just did not go away. That remains to be seen. But right now, it does seem like this Epstein story has legs. And it's something that you mentioned that our own lawmakers, elected officials from Georgia, are talking about, especially now in light, as you mentioned, in light of the reports that the president has instructed Pam Bondi to release the grand jury testimony, at least some of the information that is contained in this files. The thinking, I'm sure, is that maybe if we give a little bit, maybe that will make this story go away and will satisfy people's curiosity and their urges. But we'll see. But Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she tweeted out, if President Trump was guilty of anything regarding Jeffrey Epstein, Democrats would have used it against him in the past 4 years. And she's also now thanking Pam Bondi and the president for announcing that these grand jury transcripts will be unsealed. But there is still a lot of dissension in the ranks when you look at Republicans, many of whom would like to appeal to their supporters and get all of this information out there the way that the MAGA base would like it to be, but that goes against what President Trump has been saying, in terms of this being a big, a non-story, and that the people who are latching on to this are weak and sort of playing into the hands of Democrats who, obviously for political reasons, would love to see this story drag on. Whether they believe that there's anything more to it or not, every day that it's in the headlines is another day of potentially negative headlines surrounding the president, which they see as a win for them.
It's one of those stories that has a lot of salacious public interest in terms of who might be included as one of the individuals partaking in these, rather disgraceful acts, whether or not it's President Trump. I won't even speculate any of the other names. But in terms of the day-to-day impact of the Jeffrey Epstein case, as journalists, we can get kind of frustrated because we're looking at it, does this have any day-to-day impact on us economically or things of that nature? And yet there's still a lot of public interest in it.
Yeah. I mean, this is a story the press is going to cover because of that public interest, not because this has a direct impact on the everyday living of Americans. I mean, certainly the tariffs, for example, and possible price increases as a result. That is a story that really hits Americans in their pocketbooks, and so you see journalists go after that. But, journalists, like anybody else, they love a good story. And like you said, the salacious details of this involving sex with underage girls and big, high-profile names, bold-faced names, possibly involved in that, complicit, and perhaps even participating in those acts, is something that has really motivated a lot of people for a number of years to try to get to the bottom of it and try to figure out exactly what we do know as a result of the investigations into Jeffrey Epstein. We should mention that one of the top federal prosecutors who involved in that case, along with many others, the daughter of James Comey, who, of course, is now a big critic of President Trump's. She was just recently fired from her position in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Not clear exactly why or whether that has anything to do with the Epstein stuff, but it is certainly a lot of sort of things that are going on, and a lot of journalists around the country are now trying to connect the dots.
Well, another one of President Trump's strongest supporters nationally and locally here in Georgia, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. We reported last week that he has formally announced his campaign to become the 86th Chief Executive Officer of the state of Georgia, and this past week he announced a plan to eliminate the state income tax. I should say this is a campaign promise that he had said he would pledge to undertake, eliminating Georgia's income tax. And as Lieutenant Governor, he's kind of in a unique position to help make that happen, which is what he's doing right now. On Thursday afternoon, he announced the formation of a special state Senate committee that will meet beginning sometime this summer and be abolished in mid-December 2025, looking at that overall plan to eventually eliminate, phase out, whatever terminology you want to use, Georgia's income tax. And I found it rather interesting. We would typically look at this as a platform. Yes, I'm supporting the elimination of the state income tax. The Lieutenant Governor is putting into plan an action plan that could conceivably do that. But also on the committee, I found very interesting, majority Republicans, no surprise there, a couple of Democrats, but three very notable state senators, all three of whom, two of whom have already announced campaigns to replace the Lieutenant Governor himself in 2026.
Yes.
Senate Majority Leader John Kennedy of Macon and State Senator Steve Gooch of Dahlonega, who, as I recall, was the first candidate to announce a lieutenant gubernatorial bid. What's even more interesting, the committee will be chaired by State Senator Blake Tillery of Vandalia, who has been rumored and who has gone on record as saying he might also undertake a lieutenant gubernatorial bid.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I think that there are a lot of people who are accusing the Lieutenant Governor of playing politics here, that this is a ploy to garner the support of voters. Even his Republican opponent for the GOP nomination, Chris Carr, the Attorney General, is using that kind of language, along with some Democrats too. And you know what? This is what politicians do when they're trying to win people's votes. They talk about things like putting more money back into the pockets of voters. It's just the way it goes for all politicians of all stripes and both sides of the aisle, of course. But it certainly is nice to think about the idea of the elimination of a state tax. You dig down, and I'm sure this is what the committee is going to be doing, you dig down and look at what some other states where this has happened what the ramifications of that have been. And in Tennessee, for example, they've had to raise the sales tax in Tennessee a considerable amount in order to make up for the loss of income that the state lost when it got rid of its sales tax. And so while it sounds great and maybe even sort of looks great on paper, you really have to dig down and see exactly what happens. Where do you get this money from? And what does this money go towards? The sales tax, or rather the state tax here in Georgia, it provides a lot of the funding for things like education and infrastructure. For preparedness and response to natural disasters. So these are areas, where it might sound great to eliminate a tax, but you really have to think it through and say, well, what happens if we do that? And look no further than Central Texas, the site of those devastating, horrific floods from earlier this month, where there were calls prior to the flooding to install these warning sirens along the river that eventually flooded. But those plans were scrapped because of the costs. They didn't want to pay for them. And so you really, you really have to look at these efforts to save money, to put more money in the pockets of voters.
Which has been a winning voting strategy in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes for a great political slogan. It's a great line for an ad, that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is looking to eliminate the state tax. People hear that and they're like, oh, that sounds really good. Let me hear more about the Lieutenant Governor and his run for the Republican nomination. So we'll see how that plays out. I think it's very interesting that Chris Carr has already staked his claim to being opposed to this. And so very, very quickly, there is a clear distinction between the two main candidates at this point for the Republican nomination, for the Republican gubernatorial nomination.
Well, that's an issue we're going to continue to follow heading into for the rest of this year and into the hugely consequential 2026 midterm elections. Thanks all of you for watching and listening to this edition of Political Update for Friday, July 18th, 2025. For Rick Fulbaum, I'm Tim Darnell. Thank you for watching Political Update from Atlanta News First Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and political updates, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Listen to more of our Political Update podcasts by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.